Hi everyone, very happy to introduce our first batch of the debut shortlisted authors. We've got Susie and Daniel with us here today, and hopefully Martin will come along eventually. Susie, because you're next to me, do you want to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your book?
Yeah, so I'm Susie Aspley. I'm a debut author from Stirlingshire in Scotland. This is UK wide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is UK wide. So I live in central Scotland in Stirlingshire, where my book is set. Crow Moon. That's probably backwards, or I'm getting it out of the shot or whatever, because I kind of get this right. It's a gothic thriller, and it's set in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. And it features a journalist called Martha Strangeways, who has a tragedy in her life. So she kind of retreats from everything, trying not to be the centre of the story. She's out walking her dogs one day when she discovers the body of a teenage boy, and he has lines from a poem, which is linked to local folklore, etched across his back. So Martha becomes quite heavily involved, personally and professionally, in the investigation into his death. So I'm going to leave it there and move on to Dan.
Sounds very good. So over to me. Okay. Yeah, I'm Daniel Aubrey. I'm also obviously a debut author. I'm based in Dumfries and Galloway in southern Scotland. And my novel is Dark Island. Got it there. It is hard, isn't it, to get
It's really hard.
Yeah. So mine is set in Orkney. Also about a journalist, a reporter called Freya Sinclair, who moves back to Orkney after a quite tricky period in her life. She moves back at midwinter. So Orkney in midwinter, there's about 18 hours of darkness, hence the title, Dark Island, which I don't think I said. It would help to say. And she's rather quickly, her plans for sort of a quiet life returning to the islands get scuppered when there's a winter storm, and it unearths some human remains on the Atlantic coast in Orkney. She's going through the process of being diagnosed as autistic, and she's sort of waiting for the outcome of that. So she's sort of got a lot of things going on, and she's sort of hoping to go back to Orkney and try and forget about these things and have a relaxing time. But the islands have other plans for her, and so she becomes embroiled in the story about these remains, and the way she is, she can't let it go, even though several people in the islands would very much like this particular episode in their history to remain buried. And that's as much as I'm going to say too.
Excellent. What did it feel like being nominated for the debut prize? What was your reactions when you found out that you were on the shortlist?
I don't know if I've. I was going to say, I don't know if I've even got my head around it yet. So you can go first if you like.
Thanks. Yeah, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I never thought this. Took a long time to find a home for my book because it didn't really fit neatly on a shelf in amongst its crime fiction. But it is gothic. It's a gothic thriller. I didn't know that at the time. It was my publisher who said, "Yeah, it's a gothic thriller. It's full of crows and it's got a witchcraft element and folklore and lots of kind of the dark woods and all of that." And so I was absolutely delighted. But it took quite a long time, so I never ever expected anything like this to happen. And Dan and I both been shortlisted for 2 pretty big crime fiction prizes, and it's amazing. I'm still quite stunned. I'm really expecting a phone call in the next few weeks to say they've made a mistake. Hopefully not, but yeah, a massive imposter syndrome. I don't know about you, Dan, but that's how I just feel all the time. At the moment, it's like a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean, we were at the launch for Bloody Scotland on Thursday, and I don't know about you, Susie, but sort of been standing in that room, and Val McDermott's there, and Lynn Anderson, and it was just bizarre to be in the same room as these people and to be there as a shortlisted author as well. I've loved Bloody Scotland, that festival, for such a long time. I finally got to go a couple of years ago to see a friend of mine that was up for this same award, and it was the same time that my book was going out on submission to publishers. And I remember coming away and thinking, God, I'd love to come back just as a published author, yet alone like being on a panel or what have you. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be coming back as a shortlisted author. So when I got the phone call from Bob, I actually didn't answer because I didn't know the number. So I was like, I'm not picking that up. And then I got a voicemail, and it's Bob McDevitt from Bloody Scotland. Please call me back as soon as you get this message. And I thought, oh my God. And then that whole conversation was just surreal. It's like after I put the phone down, I stayed calm somehow, and as soon as I put the phone down, I think I screamed for about 5 minutes. Because it's a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean, but Bloody Scotland's my local festival, so it's very close to my heart. I think I went to the first one many years ago, and I did it, and they had stuff on at Stirling University then. I did a creative writing day, and I'll never forget it because I was so nervous, and everybody remember one of the tutors saying, who's written, who's writing what, and I hadn't really written anything. And everybody in the room put their hands up and said they'd had like 3 novels written. None of them were published, but it was just that feeling of like, wow, this is amazing. So I go every year to Bloody Scotland, and it is an absolutely brilliant festival. So very close to my heart, and I pitched there as well in 2019.
You did pitch perfect, didn't you, as well? So
I did, yeah. So
so
it's kind of, it's fantastic. It was really frightening, but great.
I've not attended it yet as a festival in person, but we have the debut panel and the McIlvenny shortlist quite often on in the group every year, and it's always a joy. Like, I've discovered so many great new authors from both the lists. They've ended up being like my reads of the year, or
absolutely
like my top favorite like new people to like follow through. Like, it's a really quality list every year.
It really is. I mean, one of my favorite books of last year is Squeaky Clean, which won the McIlvenny last year, and of course Callum was up for both awards. And you read that book and you can see why. It's incredible. And Alan Parks as well, I think, won it a couple of years ago, and I absolutely adore his series. So yeah, I think that I don't know about you, Sue, but that's what makes it more surreal for me. These are authors that I really admire, and as you say, the lists are always really good, and the fact that I'm there as well, you just think, wow, I never really expected it, and it really is an honour to be there. It's wild.
Yeah, I think Scotland's just a place that nurtures crime writers. I mean, it really does. We've got some of the absolute greats. Val, Denise Mina, Ian Rankin. So many people up here. Louise Welsh, she's fantastic, and it's and also it's just a really great community. Abby Mukherjee, I mean, he's been. I think he was. I'm sure Val said the other day that he was one of her debuts actually at Theakston's when she did her first Blood panel as well. So, so many great crime writers have come out of Scotland, and it's an absolute honour. I mean, it really is an absolute honour to be amongst them in this way. So brilliant.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because in a sort of a place that is packed with like really quality crime fiction, and like there's a lot of fiction being written about all of the kind of areas of Scotland. How do you find it? Is it harder to make your novel stand out?
There was nobody writing about the area that I am writing about, as far as I'm aware. And because I live here, I'm so immersed in it. I spend a lot of time out in the forests and the hills and stuff. So I usually think really dark thoughts. so it's not difficult. But I think I mean Scotland, it's quite Nordic as well. You know what I mean? And there is such a kind of wealth of. I've said this a couple of times. Somebody at a festival somewhere said, the further north you go, the darker the crime gets in terms of crime fiction. And I think there's something really true about that in Scotland. And, and I also think there can always be a new take on a place, and I've heard great things about Dan and setting his series in Orkney, people saying that he's going to do for Orkney what Anne Cleeves has done for Shetland. So there's a hard act to follow, but I'm sure you'll do it, Dan. But yeah, I just think it's such an inspiring place, whether it's a city, whether it's a rural area, whatever, there's just so much variety across Scotland that I think there'll always be room for new stories, to be honest.
That's it. Yeah, you're right. There is so much variety. I mean, for me, it was always going to be Orkney, no matter what. Like, that came first before the story was the setting, because it's just a place I love. But yeah, there's also sort of a bit of a challenge and a responsibility, I guess, when you set a story in a place like Orkney, which a lot of people love. It's not a place that I'm from, so I don't know. There's that responsibility to sort of do it right, I guess, and represent it in a respectful way, whilst you're also sort of like killing people off there, if that makes sense. So it was. I did feel quite a bit of pressure sort of setting it there, because like I said, it was a place I loved, and I kind of felt like if I don't get this right, they'll not let me back. So I was up there a couple of weeks ago for an event, and it was lovely how excited people were to sort of see their home turn into a crime scene, which is was a bit bizarre, but yeah, people. I don't suppose you. Again, like you said, Susie, about your area, I'm not sure there's been a crime. There's been book setting on it, obviously, but not a crime fiction book or series. So yeah, somebody messaged me and said like, "Oh, it's dead funny seeing my little village of Doonby, mentioning interviewing witnesses and things." Because when I was writing this, I remember seeing a BBC News story saying Orkney's the safest place to live in the UK, and I was like, "Oh, what? That doesn't really help." So it's a bit of a challenge, I think, with that, to sort of make it realistic. But it's just such a beautiful place. It's a very easy place to write about.
That's you're selling your books pretty well here, but guys, by the way, they sounded brilliant. They're exactly what I want to read. What was the research like for them? So you've said you've got folklore aspects to yours. Did you have to do a lot of research for that? You were talking about her going through an autism diagnosis. Did you have to go into like the details of, I don't know how much you knew about like people on the spectrum and things before you did the writing? Did you have to do a lot of research for them?
I'll go first.
Yeah, you go, Dan. Yeah.
I mean, I was referred for an autism assessment. I was diagnosed as autistic and ADHD in November 2022, so the same month that this book sold to a publisher. So the whole time that I was writing it, I was in the same position as Freya, in that, Freya's had the assessment and she's waiting on the outcome. I was waiting 2 years just for the assessment. So it's a very personal story. It's again like writing about Orkney. I felt like there was like a weight of responsibility writing about that particular experience, but at the same time, because it's my experience, I suppose I kind of felt like I'm gonna put as much of that in as possible, and it might not match everybody else, but I'm just going to try and get my experience. It's kind of like therapy in a way, sort of writing about being in that position, because it's kind of a no man's land. Like when you first sort of get the sense that you might be autistic, it answers a lot of questions for you, and you think, finally, you've spent your whole life thinking everybody's different from me. Why am I different? And you sort of get this glimpse of what might be the answer, but because you've not been diagnosed yet, there's always that thought in the back of your mind: what if I'm not? What is it? What does it mean? And then if I am, how is that going to change things when I start telling people that I've got this diagnosis, and people don't really understand what autism is? When I was diagnosed, the clinical psychologist said one of the things you'll probably hear most often when you tell people is you don't look autistic, because people don't really know what it means. And when you see autism portrayed in the media, in books and TV and what have you, it's usually a very sort of stereotypical particular type. It's usually male, somebody that likes playing with trains or is very sort of like, logical. So the research was basically living it, I suppose, for that side of things. For me, the research really came in with Orkney, and as I said, trying to represent that as authentically as I could, which meant having the hard task of actually having to go there at midwinter. It was a real chore, I have to say, to spend a week just before Christmas up in Orkney in the snow. Seeing the Northern Lights, it was hard, but somebody has to do it, I guess.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, folklore is kind of an interest, I suppose. I love I like lots of different books. I like lots of different crime fiction, but I do like something that has a kind of a, not necessarily a supernatural edge, but a kind of is it, isn't it sort of an edge. A lot of the Icelandic and Nordic writers, which I love, they have that edge to their work where you do wonder. And so I suppose I had a dream of being able to write like that. In terms of the actual legend within my book, it's buried in the past. Martha buys a farm. So her and her partner, she's pregnant with twins, and they buy a farm out in a remote part of the west of Scotland. Around here, it's fictional. It's a fictional community, but it is kind of based on the area around which I live. And I have had discovered this sort of moon dial in a when you get you get these all over the country, but you get a kind of a raised bit of land with trees on it, and you'll be driving along and you sort of see it in the distance, and it almost looks like an island in a field. So I had a vision of that, and so she has something like that at the back of her property that they're renovating, which is way up a big long track on a hill. And she discovers this moon dial, and it's linked to this kind of legend of somebody who was supposedly a witch in the 17th century who could shapeshift into a crow. And it was sort of rooted in, there's a huge amount of stuff about the Scottish witch trials in the last few years, been incredibly prominent about, even Parliament brought in, they did an apology, because Scotland was horrific for anybody who was accused of being a witch at that time. But my book's not really about that, but it is about women who are cast out and about this sort of misogyny. And, in a way, it was only really when I was writing it that I realised there were parallels with Martha's character. So she's very grounded, she's very feisty, she is a kind of no-nonsense person. She was an investigative journalist, and she doesn't believe in what she would describe as just mumbo jumbo. So when she gets drawn into this thing, and there's these lines from this poem about this witch written onto the back of the victims that I found in the book, she just doesn't know. So she starts to investigate herself. So the actual folklore at the centre of it, I created that. It's all imagined, but based in the sort of, the seeds of reality and the things that happened to many, many hundreds of women across Scotland hundreds of years ago. And there's a real revival in that kind of thing. You just have to go on any social media platform and see that there is a huge revival in people who have a spiritual connection to nature. And they call themselves modern day witches. And I was fascinated once I started to have a look at all of that. I spend a lot of time outside, and I'm not a religious person at all, but I definitely feel a connection to the landscape and to animals. And, that's where I kind of get my meditation, if you like. So, and also think of really dark things when I'm out there. So, so yeah, it was really good. But the next book in the series that I've started to write, that is grounded in kind of proper folklore. And I'm busy researching that at the moment. It's a little bit further north set, and it's, and that's fascinating. Slightly scary as well, some of the things that I've come across. So I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it yet. But yeah, that's it's really great. It's great to be able to kind of indulge yourself in a place that has such a rich history and a rich kind of vein of that sort of thing. So it's good.
We've got some hellos. Sarah said hello. Doug Sinclair said hello. I think he's coming on next week.
Hi, Doug. Sarah.
another one of the gang. Patsy has said hello. Patricia, who's one of our Scottish admins, she says she's met you, Susie.
She has, yeah. Hi, Patricia.
She says, Daniel, she'll see you at Noir at the bar.
Definitely, yeah. Thursday. See you there.
Yeah. So she's brilliant, Patsy. She's a real champion of Scottish authors. She's like our Scottish author champion in the group.
Patsy, she bought the first ever copy of Dark Island, as we met by chance at another event in Edinburgh. It was the day before my book was due to come out, and it was there on the shelves, and I was very surprised to see it. And I was talking to, it was Chris Carse-Wilson's event for Frey, which is a fantastic book. He was book of the month, and so we were up there for that. And yeah, it was there. And I was chatting to Chris, and Patsy was there, and she was like, "Oh, you an author too?" I was like, "Yes." I told her my name. She was like, "Oh, Dark Island." So that was very exciting. So thank you for that, Patsy.
That's good to hear. Sarah said she's got her niece and nephew are both autistic. I work with autistic people on a daily basis.
So, everybody who's autistic is different, and that's one of the things I really wanted to get across in this book. But also, and just have a book with an autistic character in, just because, not the book be about autism or being autistic or anything like that. Just because, why not? We can have our characters, we can have ourselves as characters without it being about that. So yeah.
I think it's kind of good to just see people with any kind of condition
just living their life, and getting involved in crimes.
It normalizes people. You need to see people like you in fiction, and it's really important that people write things like that. And
it's been
understanding.
Yeah, it's been so moving. There's a couple of reviews, but people have also sort of messaged me privately and in events I've done, people have come up and sort of said, I'm in the process of being diagnosed. People always say it really quietly because I think kind of nervous of like saying it for the first time in front of people, but they'll say like, I'm in the process of being diagnosed. And I really related to Freya. It was like somebody that could see the inside of my own head. And you're right, I think it is so important to have that because we don't see it much. And when we do see it, it's either coded, so like it's not explicit that this person's neurodivergent. They might act neurodivergent, but it's never explicit. Or, as I said, it's a very sort of stereotypical portrayal. So I wanted to sort of move away from that. And yeah, hopefully it seems to be going down well with people who sort of recognise a bit of themselves in Freya, which just absolutely means the world to me. It really does.
It's good to hear. Going back onto your locations, you said you made up yours, Susie. Like it's based in a real place, isn't it? But you've made a fictionalized version. How do you, and you've obviously used a very real location in Orkney. What do you think are the sort of good and bad points of like both sides of that? Because obviously if you make up a place, like people can't visit it, people love kind of going to see the locations and the crime book, but you can sort of have a lot more artistic license, but using a real place, you've got a real sort of responsibility, haven't you, to
a little bit.
Yeah. I think for me,
speak on why you chose those approaches.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of very much based on the place where I live. Although I describe the village, and it's not quite the description of the village that I live in. I live in a small village in the middle of a really beautiful national park, and it is lovely, and it's a really strong community, but it can also be quite claustrophobic at times. So I kind of wanted to convey that sense of when the boy goes missing, everybody's really worried about him, and there's searching for him and everything else. And my partner has been in the mountain rescue team for over 20 years, so I've got quite a lot in about mountain rescue, going looking for people and all of that. It led to some funny text exchanges actually with Ian when I was writing and he was somewhere else in the house, and I would send him a message saying, if you were doing a body recovery from down there such and such, how would you do this? And I think he's actually screenshotted some of those exchanges and still got, probably for the divorce. But yeah, so it was it's setting it in a place that I'm really familiar with. I've lived here for over 20 years. But at the same time, I mean, none of the people are real. None of the people in it are real. But although it's quite funny because I meet people out now when I'm walking and they will ask me, who is it? And they're all guessing who is it in the village that's in the book, and nobody is. The only real people are my dog, Bagel Jorgensen. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And so I think to be authentic in terms of visiting the places, it is set. So Aberfoyle is a real place, which is nearby. The Fairy Hill is a real place where some stuff kind of happens around there. That's a historic kind of very folkloric place that people go to. It's a real tourist spot. So certainly people could come and visit the area. And I actually quite like the idea that they're even guessing. I met somebody who said that Blacklaw, which is where Martha's farm is, they were trying to guess which farm in the area was that farm, and it isn't. It's a made-up farm on a hillside. And while I could envisage the hillside probably a couple of miles right behind me as the crow flies, that's in my head. There isn't a building on the top of that hill, but that's where I see it. So so it's kind of, I mean, Strathbran is not a place that exists around here. I think there is a village way up north in the Highlands called Strathbran, and it means Glen of Ravens. So yeah, I think it's good, but I'm not sure I would want to write about a real place and make it that kind of intimate, if you know what I mean, especially not living there. I think maybe if I wasn't living in a place but I knew it very, very well, and that would be different. So yeah, probably a bit of a vested interest from me, but very much set in a place that people would know. So, and I quite like the idea that folk are trying to guess who's in it and what the place is.
Yeah, for me, it is quite hard because, as I said before, there's a responsibility, and because it's a place I really love. I suppose it's a bit like when you've got a character that you like and you don't really want to do anything bad to them, which doesn't work for a crime fiction book. Bad things have to happen. So yeah, there's definitely that sort of like responsibility to get it right. I don't know if it's the autism or what, but I like when things are realistic. So like I like to write things. I even send up to an estate agents in Orkney that sends like messages when houses are up for sale, so I can see the inside of real houses, so I can describe them in the book, because I don't think I've got the imagination to make things like that up. So I did really like having it being very specific and thinking of places, that I'd been. And like Susie, when I'm there in these beautiful places, for some reason my mind is wandering to very dark things happening there. And, you go to somewhere like Skara Brae, which it's right there on this beautiful sort of semi-lunar stretch of sand. There's the bay there, there's the Atlantic rolling in, and there's this 5,000-year-old village just there in the land. And it's so well preserved. You can still see the beds that people slept in 5,000 years ago. And I'm there thinking, ooh, what would happen if a body was suddenly found under here? There's definitely that responsibility to sort of like, I don't know, be respectful, I suppose, of the place whilst doing that, because if people recognize too much of it, obviously it is fiction, but I don't know, people still sort of, you don't want anyone to get offended, I suppose. And I was nervous when I went back up there, but they seem to have taken to it really well. People in Orkney, it seems to have gone down really well, which is great. But they're very polite people in Orkney, so I don't know. Even if they didn't like it, I don't know if they'd tell me. That's the thing. They did say in the audiobook, unfortunately, the actress that read it has mispronounced some of the place names, which is fair enough, because the place names are like very, very Norse, very Nordic, and they are quite difficult. There's one in particular that I put in, and then I felt bad because I don't know how to pronounce it. So they've been mispronounced. But somebody said to me, "Oh, I thought maybe I'd been mispronouncing it myself my whole life," and she was Orcadian. So that's how nice they are. So if I give you the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I mean, I've even put in like real cafes and bars and places like that, which again is tricky, because obviously you don't want to slag them off and say the food was terrible or anything like that. It's about striking a balance. But I will say I did mention a burger van in there, which is a place I've always loved going, and my Freya and her godfather Fergus, who's the detective, the DI in the islands, they meet up there and have a burger, and he recommends one and says it's the best burger you'll ever eat. And the one that runs the van has seen this and is absolutely over the moon about it and is promoting my book to everybody. So it's always a good good ploy to get the local burger sellers on site. Exactly, yeah. There's a queue for the burgers and everything. She's there with the book, like, oh, did you know? So that's definitely a good ploy. I'll be doing that again. She'll be in every book now, for sure.
Somebody created a dessert for Crow Moon. Another debut
really?
Orlando Murren. He created a Crow Moon.
Oh yeah,
ice cream sundae. I was absolutely blown away.
That's amazing.
So yeah, amazing. So you need a Dark Island burger.
I need a Dark Island burger. There's a Dark Island beer, but that came first. That's what actually gave me the idea for the title. When I was drinking one of those and thinking this would be a good name for a book. But yeah, there needs to be a burger, definitely. I'll have a word.
Orlando Murren. Doug Sinclair said that as soon as he finishes his current book, he's reading both of yours. They both sound right up his street, dark and menacing. You just made that word up.
Excellent, thank you.
Yours as well, Doug.
Yeah, Sarah said she'll admit to having Google Maps open when she reads books based in Scotland.
Somebody told me they were doing that. They were actually checking on Google Street View to see, even like things like I'd said, like, Freya drove 15 minutes wherever, and somebody had checked the directions to see if it was right. And don't mess with the TISM, because you're damn right, it's right.
It's better to make places up.
Oh no, I know it to the minute. I drove it. I was making sure I was right. I even checked the tide times for the dates and the things were set in the moon, so that it was all. I wanted to get it right. Probably should have focused more on the story, but I didn't.
I've done the whole moon thing, because right. I've got the moon obviously throughout mine, and it takes place between 2 full moons, which did really happen in that year.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research to make sure that bit was right. The phases of the moon throughout, because it was which was really hard actually when I think back.
But somebody will pick you up on it if you don't, so you have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like yeah, it's worth doing. So.
Well, Doug's question, actually, because this leads neatly into Doug's question. He said, if either of you hadn't, I think you'll find review yet. If not, how will you handle them when you inevitably get one?
The closest I got is somebody sent me a message. Like they said, you've described Orkney very well. You know, I love it. I'm from Orkney, and you've got it down to a T. But you mentioned, you said at one point she turned left towards Bercy, and I think you mean right. That's very accurate. But I get my left and right wrong all the time anyway. So when I did my driving test, I had to have L and R either side of the steering wheel, so I knew which way I was going. So getting my left and right wrong is not. Yeah, I can live with that. That's the closest I've got.
I haven't had one like that, but I did have one that said that it was that because I don't want to do a spoiler, so I need to be careful how I say this. But they described the killer as a lazy Daily Mail style trope of a serial killer or something. And in actual fact, the killer in the book, I had a discussion. I'd already written the character and all of the characteristics of you know, what was happening to him, because there is quite a bit which is from the perspective of the killer in my book. And I actually did an interview with a forensic psychiatrist who worked at the State Hospital for 25 years in Scotland, which is where, you know, some of the most notorious serial killers have been, you know, housed for many, many years as patients there. And he told me he diagnosed what was what illness my character had, my antagonist. So, and I was actually quite amazed because I hadn't, you know, I'd written what came out of my head. So I found that one. It said it was lazy Daily Mail style. I mean, I had a bit of a laugh about it, but you know, everybody's got their opinions. But in actual fact, it was checked. It was properly fact checked by a forensic psychiatrist who really knew his stuff. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be writing for the Daily Mail next. I hope not. But yeah, that's about the closest I've had to it.
While you were talking about your sort of places and things, I was thinking there's a lovely Scottish author who lives down near me in Yorkshire called Liz Mystery, and she is really good at like putting pictures on her books, like the locations and things like that. Have you ever been tempted to sort of have some photos, even if they're just like an inspiration, that you share with people? Because I love them. Like I love reading her book and then looking at like where she set it.
I mean,
yeah, I take a lot of pictures. I'm very active on Instagram. Mostly they've usually got my dogs in them. But yeah, so I suppose I haven't pinned them down to locations. Maybe a few times I've said, oh, this spooky cottage that I've just passed could be the inspiration for something. Or I don't know about you, Dan, but I quite often go out and find something. So I was in the middle of a forest, like literally in the middle of nowhere a couple of months ago, and I came across a shooting range that nobody knew about, and it was a bit weird. And I find big bullet casings on the path. And I sort of feel sometimes I go out and just come across crime scenes in the middle of nowhere. It's really strange. So maybe they'll become fictional places in my book. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, actually do the locations.
Yeah, I mean,
you must do it, Dan. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say most of my Twitter and Insta is probably just pictures of Orkney when I'm there anyway. And yeah, when I am there, I'll sort of like take a picture and say, yeah, this is where such and such happens, or this is where the book opens, or something like that. And like Susie, you should got the dogs in there too, because you know you got it. So yeah, I do think it adds to it. Being able to do that, and I was really glad that we got a picture of Orkney on the cover of the book as well. So that actually is Orkney, and it's quite an iconic Orkney view across the Hoy as well. So I got the map in there as well, which I was like that's the only thing I was like really gonna sort of say I absolutely have to have. Got to be a map in there. But yeah, I think it adds as well, especially if you're sort of like quite visual. In your imagination, I think it always helps, doesn't it? I think Liz is at. I think she's doing like the bar in Stockport in a couple of months when I'm doing that as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to chat to her about that.
She's a legend, Liz. Well worth.
Yeah, I know her name. That's I do think it's really nice, especially when you've got a place as pretty as Orkney to sort of like share pictures of. I'm always happy to do that.
Yes, to be fair, her pictures have generally been of Bradford, which is a bit less pretty.
You can find beauty in anything.
Patsy has said Susie was your forensic psychiatrist, Rona Morrison.
No. No, I'm not gonna name them, but well.
And Sarah has asked, and I like asking this question anyway, so I'm going to ask Sarah's question. What are you both reading at the moment? And kind of what are your reading recommendations?
Do you want to go first?
Do you want to go on?
I can go if you like. I'm just finishing. I am very late to Michael Connolly's Bosch series. I only started it a couple of years ago. I'm working my way through that, so I'm just finishing Nine Dragons, which is his one set in Hong Kong, which I'm loving because I used to live in Hong Kong, so it's quite interesting. In fact, the book is set the same time that I was living there, so that's sort of like been a bit of a trip down memory lane in some ways. I didn't go to the same places that Bosch winds up in this book. But yeah, so I'm reading that and reading my way through those, and I've just got up next. I'm going to be reading Double Proof by Martin Stewart, who's on our shortlist. Because yes, I'm very keen to read all our books on the shortlist because we're there for a reason. I'm guessing there must be decent these books if everybody's got one up on the shortlist. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, and I'm always keen to recommend Burnt Offerings as well by Daniel Devlin if anyone's interested in the witch trials that you just mentioned. So also a very good book. Stop cringing.
Indeed. Danielle and I were mentees together a few years ago on the Future Bookshelf, which was a Harder Hachette sort of initiative, which was great. So we met. Yeah, it's a great book. Recommend that. For me, what am I reading now? I've usually got a few things on the go. I'm an absolutely voracious reader. And I also listen to audiobooks when I'm traveling. So I'm rereading Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow, Peter Hoag, which is a classic. It's one of the kind of first ever proper Scandi noir books. Absolutely love that. And I'm going to try and find the film on Netflix because I really want to watch it again. And I just love it. It's just got everything that a fantastic Nordic noir should have. Smilla Jasperson, who's a Greenlander, kind of Danish Greenlander, really spiky character, starts to investigate the death of a child who was apparently fallen off a roof in Copenhagen, which she hasn't really. So yeah, she's just got under the ship. I think I'm in about the last third of the book, but it's one of those books that I kind of want to read it really quickly, but I want to really eke it out as well because it's so good, even though I know what happens because I've read it loads of times. I've just started Val McDermott's Queen Macbeth, which is part of the Darkland series. I bought it on Thursday at the Bloody Scotland launch. So that's really good. It's a retelling of the story, based, I think, more on the facts of history. I think Val was saying during her session about Lady Macbeth, who she has renamed Queen Macbeth. And so I've just started that. What am I listening to? I've just finished a brilliant audiobook, which I love. It's a fantasy series, which is all about witches are part of it, but there's an Australian writer called A.G. Slatter, Angela Slatter. I absolutely love her stuff, and it was the Briar Book of the Dead that I've just finished. That is fantastic if you like that kind of thing. And another I think one of my all-time recommended reads is a book by Hannah Kent, also an Australian writer, called Burial Rites, and it's about the last woman who was executed in Iceland. And she has fictionalized that, and it is the most incredible book. The audiobook's really good as well. So yeah, they'd be my recs. But yeah, also going to read everybody on the shortlist. I've read a few already, so yeah, can't wait for that. So many books to read in so little time.
This is it. Got to write them and read them.
And I'm also trying to write as well.
Always the problem, isn't it? Burial Rites is outstanding.
It's one of my all-time favorites.
I was on one of the panels when it was like nominated for the Guardian First Book Award, and it was my winner of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's every time I read it, it just, it's hard to put into words. I mean, it is like magic. It's given me goosebumps now just thinking about it, because the story is so tragic, and there's such a sense of inevitability about what is going to happen to Agnes. And you don't want it to happen. You want to run into the book and you want to pull her out of what's happening because it's so unjust. But yeah, incredible writing, incredible book. So always top of the kind of recommended pile for me. And there's some fantastic debuts out this year. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant in the crime fiction genre. So read them all.
But as always, make sure you check out all of the debut lists, because it is going to be outstanding, I'm sure. My favourite read of last year was Maiden, which won
All right.
the debut list.
Kate
last year.
Foster's, yeah.
Kate Foster, yeah, I would not shut up about it from the time I read it. When I interviewed her in like January till like, well, I still haven't. I loved it so much. I've just got The King's Witches to read by her, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm doing a panel with Kate at Bloody Scotland. Myself and Kate and Michael Malone. And it's all witchy stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be fab.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. We need to, yeah. What Patsy is just saying, because I've added burnt offerings. I've just been like adding it to my Amazon. And Patsy's just suggested that we have like a witchy kind of thing. We have a spooky festival in group around Halloween. As close to Halloween as we can get it and call it Spook Fest. So maybe we need a witchy panel.
You do, definitely. Dan, you need to get a witch in the next book.
I have an idea for book 3. That might be too late, but yeah, there's possibly.
So with your books, because you've already hinted at writing book 2, I'm going to presume you're writing book 2 as well, Dan. Are your books that are on this list, are they going to be standalone, or are you turning them into a series? What
yeah, mine's a series.
Yes, same.
Yeah, mine's series.
What can you tell us about book 2, if you are writing it?
Do you want to go first, Susie?
So it takes Martha on the next stage of our journey. So it has most of the characters that survive from Crow Moon are in it. I mean, it could all change once my editor gets it, once my publisher sees it. So I actually wrote book 2 over a year ago, and I've not looked at it since. And I recently went back into it to start an edit. And it's quite scary because I don't know about you, Dan, but
yeah, it's a struggle.
I think almost because Crow Moon's just had such a fantastic reception. You know, I mean, I never expected it would get so much attention, and everything about it is incredible. You know, the attention that it's getting and the fact that we're on these debuts and everything is brilliant. But it does give me a little bit of fear, thinking, "Oh my God, I've got to do it again." You know,
again, exactly. That's it.
Yeah. So, but I think on a positive note, the world's built. You know, I think a huge amount goes into the first book in a series because you have to build the world. You have to really build your characters. You have to make them authentic and believable. But the world is there. So Martha's world is there. People know her. They know all her friends. They know her family. You know, they kind of know what she's about. I think the other thing for me, as somebody, I think Karen Campbell, who's a fantastic Scottish writer, she once said to me, write your second book as though it's a standalone, but you obviously still want some of that history through it. And I think that's really good advice because I've struggled a little bit with how much of book 1 do you put into book 2. Because you don't want readers who've read book 1 just to be, you know, oh, not this again. You know, how many times are you going to tell us that sort of stuff? So I think that'll be a really kind of tricky balance to get. But I think that was really great advice, is write it so that anybody just coming to it could just read it and it's a story in its own right. So, but the second book takes Martha on. As I say, it's still kind of grounded in Strathbran. It's got folklore, it's got a winter goddess, it's got jewelry, it's got body parts, it's got investigations and terror. So that's all the bits of it at the moment, but quite honestly, they might end up in a very different order once my editor gets hold of it. so we'll see, but I am re-engaging with the story, and it's fun thinking about how I'm going to mix everything up. I think needs a lot of work, but yeah, it's really good to go back into it. About you, Dan?
Yeah, so it's the same. Mine's going to be a series. It was signed for a 3-book deal because we sort of pitched the first 3. There's a kind of thread that will run through at least the first 3. So yeah, so I'm working on book 2 at the minute, whilst also trying to keep one eye on book 3 and what I'm going to put in that, because now I'm finding, I don't know if you're finding this as well, Susie, that there's things I'm thinking, you know, you start a book and you obviously there's going to be backstory to the character, but you can change it as you go. Now the backstory is written down. It's, you know, I can't change it, and I'm thinking, hey, damn it! If only I put this in book 1. If only I thought of that, and I can't change it now. So I am trying to sort of like have one eye on book 3 as well, which is quite tricky. but like you said, it's a very different thing, isn't it? Right, in the second book, especially the second book in the series. I listened to a podcast with Trevor Wood, who said that when you write book 2, you're essentially writing for 2 audiences, and it's for people that have read book 1 and people who are just picking up your series for the first time. And it's a really hard thing to make sure that because you can there can either be stuff in there that pleases both audiences, or you can just really annoy them both. Yeah, so it can go either way.
Yeah.
And I don't suppose you can be too conscious of it the whole time either. Otherwise, you're going to get really bogged down in sort of like either over explaining things or trying too hard to hide sort of like the twists and reveals from the first book. So I'm sort of trying to juggle that at the minute and eke a story out that will make sense. But something happens at the end of Dark Island that relates to sort of Freya's dad. The backstory with Freya and her dad who died when she was younger is a big part of Dark Island. There's something happens at the end which sort of sets up what she'll be doing at the start of book 2. And that's about as much as I can say. But it will still be in Orkney. It'll be in summer this time, so 18 hours of daylight instead of darkness. Pretty much doesn't get dark in summer. So there'll be more of the sort of like outlying islands as well, because Orkney's, there's about 72 islands, I think, in Orkney. The loads of places to explore because it was midwinter for Dark Island and the weather doesn't really allow you to take many ferry trips. At that time of year, it was mostly focused around mainland and the islands that you could get to by car. So now I'm having a bit of fun sort of exploring a bit more remote kind of locations in some of the outlying islands as well. So there's going to be a bit more of that in the second book.
Fabulous.
That's as much as I'm saying though.
Fair enough. We got to actually meet both of your dogs earlier, weren't we? We were talking about pets a bit a while ago, and you both got your dogs next to you.
Yeah. They've been here the whole time, occasionally just off camera, slabbering and making noises. We've got Maggie's here at the minute, at my feet. There she is.
Yeah, so, I don't know if I can show you Big. I better not, because I'll probably knock the computer over or something. He's lying down next to me. He's on all my social media, Bagel Jorgensen. So just look him up.
Bagel's amazing.
I've probably told this story before if anyone watching, but when I do parents' evenings, we do ours virtually. And I always tell my kids I'll give them an extra better report if I get to meet their pets. When we do a video chat, I'm like, your pet is in the video. I'm going to say something nice about you.
Yeah.
Well, Dan and me sort of connected through our mutual dogs, didn't we, really? Because you've got a black Labradoodle and I've got a black Labradoodle. Mine's Minnie and yours is Maggie.
Maggie. So they're like sisters from different mothers. Yeah. It's they are really quite similar. So yeah, I think that was when we first started like interacting on Twitter, wasn't it? Like, oh, you know.
There's a collection. My parents have got a black Labradoodle.
Really? Oh, there you go. We've got a little club forming. Yeah.
Right, little club going. Yeah.
And they always seem to recognise other Labradoodles as well. I mean, she's mad for all dogs, but you've seen another Labradoodle, it's like she knows. And yeah, so if we got them all
Mine
together,
thinks she's a Jack Russell. She actually thinks she's a Jack Russell because she's grown up with 2. Yeah. So she'll try and squash into the smallest beds because she actually thinks she's that size. She's as daft as a brush. So
they really
she just thinks she's a terrier.
And we've had such a lovely chat about that. Oh no, I remembered the question I was going to ask you now. Sorry, I got distracted by the dogs.
Good segue.
That's fine. We can keep talking about dogs. That's fine.
I was going to ask you. Sam is hosting the other half of the debut panel, and I'm going to steal her favourite question, which is when and if they make like a film, TV, Netflix adaptation of your book, what character would you like to play?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow.
That is a very good question. I mean, yeah, I think it's mentioned in the front of my book, so I can say this. Dark Island's been optioned and is currently they're looking at getting it into production for TV. I do have conversations with them about that. So it's something I've thought about a fair bit. I'd have to be a dog walker, but everybody wants to be the dog walker. That's the thing. The dog walker that sort of comes across the body, stumbles across something. But I would really like, you know how Harlan Coben, he's always got like he always has a cameo in his shows that are on Netflix. He always turns up as like a waiter or something like that. I think I'd want to be doing that, something sneaky in the background. So only people who recognise me would be like, oh, there he is. So that's what I'm hoping to get if it ever gets that far.
I haven't got a clue, to be honest. I've never thought of it. I've thought of who I'd like to play my main characters, but I've not thought of been in it myself.
See,
at
I'm
all.
obviously very
Yeah.
egocentric because I've not thought of that bit. I've just thought about what I do. I don't care who
I'd
plays
be
Freya. Just let me in.
I'd be such a terrible actress. Yeah, I'd have to be like, somebody walking past, probably a dog walker, as Dan said. I've got absolutely no idea. Or a victim, maybe. Victim number 3 or something like that. But no, honestly, I don't know. Don't know. I certainly couldn't play Martha, although I was a journalist. But she does a very different kind of journalism to the stuff that I used to do. And our best friend Ola is quite brash. She's originally from the Northeast, but she's not based on me at all. But she does pursue the sexy priest, so maybe that would be quite nice to play. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly, well, it's a great question.
It's a
No,
great
when you
question.
said that, I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say, who do you want to play your characters?
No, we like to
Um,
flip it in our group.
Yeah.
You know,
Good one.
none of this boring, like asking you who you want to play. Are you going to any other book festivals this year apart from? I mean, obviously you're going to Bloody Scotland, but any other ones?
Yeah,
I think
most of them, I think.
I was going to say you'll be at a few, I think, won't you, Susie? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be at Harrogate, won't we? Obviously.
Yeah.
Because
Butte Noir, which is a brilliant wee festival on the Isle of Bute in beginning of August. Newcastle Noir from my home stomping ground in Newcastle. Iceland, I'm going back to Iceland in November, which is a brilliant book festival. So yeah, like loads of stuff.
Are you going on a panel then, or are you not? I'll say I'm asking questions.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope I'll get a panel. Yeah, but we haven't heard yet. So, but I'll definitely be going anyway. I love Iceland.
It is amazing. Yeah. When I went I saw you there a couple of years ago. Yeah, we were both there.
You
Weren't we,
did?
2 years ago. Yeah. That is a really good festival. We tempted to go back.
Well, we'll see you in Harrogate. Me and Sarah, we're both going. So we'll look out for you. Bring some books for you to sign.
Brilliant.
We've got a couple. We've got about 7 minutes left. What have you prepared your victory speeches just in case? You're like, if you were going to win, you know what you're going to say?
Nope. I daren't.
I can't even imagine it.
No.
No, it's just such. I mean, it's can't get my head around even being shortlisted. So I've absolutely no idea.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I think even if I did think of something, if you win it, I'm sure it'd just go straight out of your head anyway. I'll be no good. So no, I'm genuinely, and I suppose everybody thinks they have to say this, but I am genuinely just honoured to be on this list. And the fact that we're on both lists as well is just, I really haven't got my head around that. It is quite crazy because I think, we've been doing all this stuff for Bloody Scotland recently, but then next month we're going to be in Harrogate and it's a whole different one, and it feels like the same one. I haven't quite separated them out of my head yet.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, and there are so many. I mean, there are always amazing debuts, but this year there are so many brilliant crime fiction novels out there. It is quite it's quite mind blowing that we're on these 2 lists, really, because there's fabulous books out there. I mean, ours must be, certainly amongst them. But they're on both shortlists. All of the books are just brilliant. So So I wouldn't know. I've got no idea. And actually, I don't think I would. I don't think I would prepare something. It would just feel too weird, It really would.
Before I ask you to give people a recap of what they're going to go away and buy, I'm going to ask you my favourite author chat question from when I first started doing these, which is, would you like to make a graphic novel version of your book?
I can't draw, so I'd struggle. I'd love somebody to do it. I think it would be very interesting, but it would all be stickmen if I did it. It would really not do. Really wouldn't do the scenery justice, I don't think. But yeah, that would be fascinating. I'd love the idea of that. Yeah, I think it lends itself as well to like dark stories like ours. To have that kind of format.
I don't know about a graphic. I don't know about a graphic novel. Somebody actually asked me the other night at the book event that I was doing about fan fiction and would I love to see my characters portrayed. And I know there are some authors, Natasha Pulley, whose work's fantastic. She has a whole series, The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, and the whole her I've actually just started a new audiobook, The Mars House, and it's a totally different story, but there are characters in it from her other books, and I absolutely love that. You
I
know,
like when they do that,
it's amazing. She just mentioned the watchmaker and his daughter. Fascinating stuff. Quite magical realist, which I love. And I've seen on social media that fans create characters. You know, the artists basically create them and do this stuff. So I would absolutely love somebody to do that. I'd love to see how they see my characters actually.
That'd be interesting.
The interpretation, but yeah, if somebody's up for doing that, then please go ahead.
There's a lot of cracking crime authors that do write kind of graphic novel adaptations, and things, especially up in Scotland. We've got about 4 minutes left, so remind people while we've got you here and we've got an audience watching you, remind them what they're going to go away and buy. Do you want to start us off, Susie? Oh no, go on.
Do you mean our books or?
Yeah, your books. What are they going to go away and buy?
So
the point of this is they're going to go and buy your books now.
I can't even get it in the right place. Look, I'm still doing that again. So Crow Moon, which is a gothic thriller set in the west central Scotland around Stirlingshire, and it has crows and it has witches and it has a journalist and it has something in a matchbox, which I haven't mentioned, which is quite secret that Martha carries with her all the way through the book, which is very, very close to her heart. And yeah, please read it and enjoy it. And if you like it, give us a review. Thank you.
And
Dan?
I will echo the thing about the review very much. So yes, it's Dark Island. Have I got that in the right place? I can't see when I've got the book up.
You've done better than I did.
Yes, crime thriller set in Orkney in midwinter, with a neurodivergent reporter, main character Freya Sinclair, who gets stuck into to finding out the truth around human remains that are found after a winter storm unburies them near to Scarab Brae on the Atlantic coast in Orkney. So if you love Orkney and darkness and twists and turns, give it a go.
Brilliant. And then all that's left for me to say is good luck when you go to your various debut prize events. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been fascinating.
It's been loads of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great.
Been a lot of fun. Good luck to everybody. Thanks.